I remember the exact moment the silence settled in. It was late evening, the kind where the city's hum fades into a distant murmur, and the room felt heavier than it should. She sat across from me, her eyes avoiding mine, fingers tracing the edge of a coffee mug that had gone cold. Words hung unspoken between us, thick like fog. I could feel the pull, the instinct to reach out, to plead for one more chance, to unravel the threads of what we'd built. But I didn't. Instead, I let the quiet expand, filling the space where my voice might have begged. That night marked the end, though it didn't announce itself with shouts or tears. We'd been together for years, weaving lives that seemed inseparable until they weren't. Small cracks had appeared over time, missed calls, conversations that trailed off into nothing, a growing distance I pretended not to notice. When she finally said it, that she needed to go, that love had shifted into something unrecognizable, I nodded. No questions, no demands for reasons, just acceptance, raw and unadorned. Stoics, I've come to understand through my own unraveling, don't beg for love because they know it's not theirs to command. Love isn't a possession. It's a fleeting visitor, arriving and departing on its own terms. In that moment, as she gathered her things, I recalled Marcus Aurelius's quiet insistence on controlling only what's within reach. My actions, my responses, nothing more. Begging would have been a betrayal of that, a frantic grasp at illusions, so I chose silence, not out of pride, but because speaking would have diluted the truth. The days that followed were a study in restraint. Mornings blurred into afternoons, each one tempting me to send a message, to seek closure that doesn't exist. But I held back, retreating inward. It wasn't numbness, it was deliberate withdrawal, like stepping away from a fire that's burned too long. Emotions surged, regret, loneliness, a dull ache that echoed in empty rooms, but I observed them without feeding them. Let them pass, I told myself, like clouds across an indifferent sky. If this reflection resonates with you, consider subscribing. Some lessons only make sense when you stay. In the quiet hours, I turn to old texts, not for solace, but for clarity. Epictetus spoke of distinguishing what belongs to us from what doesn't. Her choice wasn't mine to alter. My dignity was. Begging would have stripped that away, turning me into a shadow of myself, chasing echoes. Instead, I focused on the small acts, walking alone in the rain, breathing deeply when memories surfaced, rebuilding routines that didn't depend on another. Those walks became a ritual, the rain washing over me without resistance, each drop a reminder that life persists regardless of our attachments. I would pause under streetlights, watching shadows stretch and fade, much like the fleeting nature of relationships we hold so dear. There were nights when the weight pressed harder. I'd stare at the ceiling, replaying moments. Her laugh in a crowded cafe, the way she'd lean into me during storms. Loss isn't dramatic, it's persistent, a quiet erosion that wears away at the edges of your days. But I didn't fight it. Acceptance came without fanfare, a gradual settling into the reality that what was once shared now belonged to the past. I learned that love, when begged for, loses its essence. It's given freely or not at all. Stoics embrace this, withdrawing not in defeat, but in preservation of their inner equilibrium. They recognize that emotional pleas only prolong the inevitable, turning a clean break into a jagged wound that heals slower. Months passed, and the silence became a companion, no longer an intruder, but a familiar presence. I didn't seek replacements or distractions. I sat with the void, letting it teach me in its unhurried way. Auto-control isn't suppression. It's discernment, knowing when to act and when to refrain. Like a gardener who prunes not out of anger, but to encourage growth. In pulling back emotionally, I found a strange freedom, a release from the invisible chains that bind us to others' whims. No more tethering my worth to another's affection. No more measuring my days by the warmth of a shared glance. Dignity emerged from that, unshakable, even as the world moved on around me, indifferent to my private reconstruction. What I learned wasn't a formula or a victory. It was simply this. In the face of loss, silence honors what was, without demanding more. Begging bends you. Restraint reveals you. And in that revelation, life continues, quieter perhaps, but whole. I began to notice how this principle extended beyond that one relationship, seeping into other corners of my existence. Work conflicts that once prompted heated defenses now met with measured responses. Friendships that drifted were allowed to fade without desperate attempts to revive them. It was as if the silence had taught me to value my own company first, to build from within rather than seek validation from without. I see it now in the small rituals that returned unannounced. The morning coffee, no longer shared, but sipped alone with the newspaper's rustle, the ink smudging slightly under my fingers as I turned the pages. The walk to the market where her favorite bread used to wait, now just a loaf for one, carried home in a paper bag that crinkled softly. These moments don't ache as they once did. They simply are, part of the fabric of a day that unfolds on its own. Silence became the frame around the memory, preserving it without distortion, like an old photograph kept in a drawer, glanced at occasionally but not dwelled upon. No need to revisit, to dissect, to plead for a different ending. What was given freely in its time stays intact precisely because I let it go without clawing, without turning it into something bitter or unresolved. There were mornings when the old impulse flickered. A half-typed message, deleted before send. The cursor blinking expectantly before I closed the screen. But the hand paused, the breath steadied, and in that brief suspension, I felt the shift. That pause was everything. It taught me that dignity isn't loud. It's the quiet refusal to shrink yourself for someone else's comfort, to diminish your stature in pursuit of fleeting reassurance. I had bent before, in other seasons of my life, chasing affection like a debt owed, convinced that persistence would yield what I desired. This time, the spine held, not out of hardness, but out of a deeper knowing. My value doesn't fluctuate with another's choice, doesn't rise or fall based on who stays or leaves. It's inherent, steady, like the rhythm of waves that continue long after the storm has passed. The days lengthen now, unhurried, stretching out with a calm I hadn't known before. Friends notice the change, the way I listen more, speak less, my words chosen with care rather than spilled in haste. They ask if I'm all right, their concern laced with curiosity. I nod, smile faintly. Yes, better even. The withdrawal wasn't retreat. It was return, to the center that was always there, waiting beneath the noise of wanting, beneath the clamor of emotions that once dictated my path. Love leaves, and the self that remains is not lesser. It is clearer, stripped of illusions, free from the haze of dependency. I find myself appreciating solitude in ways I never did, turning pages of books late into the night, or simply sitting by the window as dusk falls, watching the light change without needing to fill the air with sound. And so the story ends, not with closure or triumph, but with this steady presence that has become my anchor. The room is empty, yet not hollow, filled instead with the subtle hum of my own thoughts. The heart, once restless, now rests in a quiet assurance. Stoicism, I discovered, isn't the absence of feeling. Far from it. It is the presence of choice, to stand unbroken in the space where someone once stood, to acknowledge the pain without letting it define you. It's in the deliberate steps forward, the measured breaths, the acceptance that life, in all its impermanence, offers lessons in every departure. Looking back, I realize how that initial silence reshaped everything. It wasn't just about not begging. It was about reclaiming agency in a world that often pulls us toward chaos. The Stoics knew this intimately, Seneca writing of fortune's whims, urging us to prepare for loss as we would for a changing season. In my case, the season turned without warning, but the preparation came in hindsight, forged in those quiet days of reflection. I think of her sometimes, not with longing, but with a neutral regard, like recalling a path once walked but no longer needed. The withdrawal allowed space for new growth, subtle at first, a renewed interest in forgotten hobbies, conversations with strangers that spark without expectation. In time, The emotional containment became second nature. Triggers that once stirred unrest now pass like fleeting shadows. A song on the radio, a familiar scent in the air. They arrive, they linger briefly, then depart. I observe them, nod in acknowledgement, and continue. This isn't coldness, it's balance, a way to honor the full spectrum of experience without being consumed by it. Dignity, I've learned, is the quiet thread that weaves through it all, holding the fabric together when everything else unravels. And in that holding, there's a profound peace, one that doesn't shout but whispers steadily through the days. Perhaps the deepest lesson was in the acceptance without explanations. We crave reasons, don't we? To make sense of the shift, to pin it down with words. But explanations rarely satisfy. They often complicate what is already clear in its simplicity. She left because she chose to. That was enough. Demanding more would have invited a cycle of justifications, regrets, perhaps even resentment. Instead, I let it stand as it was, unadorned. Stoics teach that true freedom lies in this release, in not chaining ourselves to outcomes beyond our control. It's a hard-won insight, one that echoes in quieter moments, reminding me that life's ebbs are as natural as its flows. Now, as I sit here reflecting, the city outside hums on, oblivious. The mug is warm in my hands again, but this time it's mine alone. The silence isn't empty. It's full of possibility, of paths untaken and those yet to unfold. What began as a personal unraveling became a reconstruction, piece by deliberate piece. Begging for love would have halted that. Restraint propelled it forward. And in the end, that's the quiet truth I've carried with me. We are whole not despite our losses, but through how we meet them. With open eyes, steady hands, and a heart that knows when to speak and when to simply be.